Hey, Adam. So apologies for the very last minute response. As you can see, I'm sort of off-grid-ish. Like, check this out. So I have an internet connection, but I'm slightly off-grid. And wait, let me wait for this boat to pass. Sorry, okay. So I'm slightly off grid, but I forgot to put my ScaleAbout page on, I guess, on hold, or put a notice up on my ScaleAbout page. But anyways, let's stick to the topic. Thank you very much for your question. Super good question. So let me check it out again, and let's look at some of the details. So, I mean, you're asking about best practices for managing a web development team where one does front end and the other does back end. So I'm assuming like you're a two-person team and you're building a startup or something like this. And then you're saying, okay, methods, sprints, meetings, programs, tasks, responsibilities, API, decision making, documentation, testing, and whatever else, right? So I mean, clearly awesome question, right? Like super important question, and clearly super important question that has severe consequences. Whatever you choose matters greatly. Super difficult, to be honest. Like, I'm not sure, or rather, I should rather say maybe I'm pretty sure I'm the wrong person to ask. Okay, I mean, I'll clearly give my opinion because I do have opinions on this topic, but I just want to say, like, mind you, that I guess I'm a bit too much in the nerd end of the liking to keep hacking at code in order to figure out what the best solution for things are, or I'm fond of hacking on the same problem, or thinking about the same problem for too much time, or for a lot of time, in order to try to figure out the most elegant solution. And from a sort of project management point of view, or from a sort of time value of money point of view, that's probably not always the best solution, or probably most of the time that's not the best solution. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, like, be aware of that. But anyways, I mean, I have really not built a startup with more people, or let's say a software with more people from start to finish. I've started multiple things like this with friends. It was great fun. So kudos to you, man. This is going to be great fun. But the keyword that I think about when it comes to managing different responsibilities, or dividing up the responsibility of doing different things when you're building some kind of product, I think is interfacing, right? So if you think about an interface in the programming sense, right? Like, you've got let's think of an object-oriented language. You've got a class and it has an interface, or you've got a superclass and it has an interface, and whatever subclass you design has to follow that interface. And as long as you follow the interface, then that's fine, right? And then you can think of, so you can think of it from a compiler point of view, like it has to type check. But then you can think about it beyond that. You can say also that, okay, but actually there are semantic things that the compiler isn't able to check, such as, let's say that we have this interface where you're supposed to pass a string, right? Or we have this interface where there is a method declared, and this method accepts an argument, and this argument is a string. But actually all strings are not valid. So string is actually an incorrect data type describing this valid input here. And of course, I mean, what you should do when you have one of these scenarios is that you should push forward and say, well, okay, if all strings are not valid as input, then my contract is wrong, right? Then I need to revise it so that we take a new type. So let's say, I mean, let me try to be more concrete. If you have a phone or contact class, let's say, right, and you have a string that represents a phone number, then clearly all strings are not valid phone numbers. So if you have a contact class that has a phone number field, then that phone number field should probably be of a data type that ensures that whenever you have an instance of that data type, that data type is valid, or that instance is valid. So a string is not suitable. Then you should need something like you introduce a phone number class or something like this. So why am I saying that? Well, I'm saying that because then that, like, if you're in a scenario where there's actually two, where I'm get super confused. If you're in a scenario where you actually don't, for some reason, want to introduce that other subclass, then you might also have sort of, let's call them semantic requirements that are not on the type level. So as in, like, well, you're saying on the type level that this thing accepts a string, but in actuality it doesn't actually accept a string. It accepts a subset of all possible strings. So then you need to understand what that subset is and talk about that subset. So the reason I'm saying this is that whenever you divide responsibility between two people, or more people for that matter, right? If we are to be as independently productive as possible, then the contract needs to be clear, right? If the contract, as in, like, well, I do this thing and what I pass to you has this structure, and what you do is you do that thing, and what you pass to me is this structure. Or, I mean, depends on how we do this. I mean, if it's in a, did you say back end front end? I think you said back end front end, right? Let's look at that. Yeah, you were saying back end, front end, right? So there's actually a clear division, right? There's the request response model. So the front end makes requests to the back end, and the back end responds with responses. So if you can both sit down and start and define the API, and then you go hack away, right? So, I mean, if we think about it in terms of steps, right? So first define the product in, like, massive detail, then define the API, describe the API, describe the calls, and then you can start actually solving the problems in the back end and in the front end. Now, of course, I mean, so this is kind of the way we've been trying to approach it when I've been hacking away on smaller projects. But the issue is, of course, that it's really difficult to figure out everything from the start. So somehow you need to build something into the process that allows for deviations from the decided contract. So you need a process for handling when the inevitable occurrence that somebody will find out that actually the contract does not suffice for all of the different use cases that you had imagined, right? So if you're saying, well, I need this call and I'll pass, so there should be this API call and it will have a request of this structure and it will give a response of this other structure, then that's fine as long as that does work, right? As long as you don't, during the development of either the back end or the front end, discover that, well, actually there's this particular thing that I want to do that means that the request really should look like something else, or the response really should look like something else, right? And like these might be for various different reasons. Like one, for example, it might be extremely poor performance to do the thing that you originally envisioned that you should do, or like so let's say, I mean, you didn't think about that, well, okay, actually I need 10 of these things at the same time, so it doesn't really make any sense for me to do 10 requests, so we need to somehow batch them. I mean, I'm just kind of making up something completely arbitrary, but the point is, of course, that, I mean, I think you can see the point that it's not easy to preemptively figure out exactly what your application looks like, or exactly what the interface of yours between the front end and the back end should be, right? And that's not even talking about the issue of what is the application that we're actually building. So it's like I work at Uppsala University, and I have a colleague who's a researcher who works in or who does a lot of research in conceptual modeling. And I mean, I'm totally paraphrasing him here, and I'm probably getting what he's saying wrong, but he's talking a lot about how we are underestimating the importance of constructing a well thought through conceptual model of our actual application, like of what we're actually building, or I mean, I'm saying it from a sort of building point of view, but he's approaching it from a sort of business point of view, as in like, well, what is it that this business is actually doing? What are the sort of verbs and the nouns that we use to describe different like entities within this organization, and what do these entities actually mean? And I would stress that I think this is a massively important point. Like, if you can think about it from this perspective, like, before we have words for the things that the business does, and before these words are somewhat exact, we don't actually know what we're doing, right? And that's the issue, right? Like, that's sort of a precursor to the issue of defining the contract. Like, of course we can't define the contract if we aren't even sure what we're building, right? And I mean, this sounds stupid, right? It's like, well, I've got this startup, of course I know what I'm building. But that's not the point, right? You know what you're building, kind of, right? Like, ish, roughly where we're going. But the details are super duper vague, right? Most of the time. I mean, I'm not trying to be offensive. Maybe you actually do have a really good understanding of what you're building and where you're going. But most of the time, I would venture to guess that we don't. So, like, I would start from that end, right? And try to sort of see what follows from that. So I would say, okay, let's spend a lot of time to try to figure out a few words and sort of map what we are actually doing. Like, let's map the problem that we're actually solving. Let's invent words, right, that mean particular things, and say, okay, when I say this word, I specifically mean this kind of thing. And this kind of thing has this kind of relationship with these other things. And I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sort of understand your whole domain and then build everything. Of course not, right? This is the step where we identify all of the different pieces or all of the different things that are relevant to the building of our particular application, or rather, maybe we should think about it of the launching of our particular business. And then when you know that, then you can scale back, right? Or you can delimit. You can skip particular things, right? You can say, well, I won't do this thing and I won't do this thing, and this is for version 2 and this is for version 32 and whatnot, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to build everything, but I think that's an extremely useful exercise. So yeah, I would start in that end, right? Like, step 1, aggressively try to define your business. Aggressively try to invent words that describe the different processes and nouns within your business, and make them very unambiguous, right? And spend more time on this than you would think is healthy. That's what I would do. And then, following that, try to define some kind of contract of, like, okay, well, what should this particular what is the interface between the two different parties? Like, what's the interface between the front end and the back end? Which, I mean, specifically means design the API before you start to build in any particular end, right? And also, I'm thinking of another thing. Maybe we should also talk about lean, right? So, like, actually, I mean, ScaleAbout is a great example. Like, I've been in contact with some people or I've been in contact with a person at ScaleAbout, and we've talked a bit about how I think it's pretty cool how lean they are, in that they are skipping a lot of things. Like, I mean, now I can, as a ScaleAbout person, as a person on their platform, I don't know, author, whatever, I can actually edit my own profile page. But previously I couldn't. Like, I had to send an email to someone and say, oh, can you please edit my page, right? Because they're actively trying to stay lean, which makes sense, right? Because they're not trying to punch a bunch of money into something that turns out that it won't work, right? So I think that's, of course, also extremely important. Like, even if you spend a lot of time trying to define, right, like the conceptual model, like getting everything down in detail, it's super important to say, well, okay, we understand this thing, but let's not care about it now, right? Or you can even leave black holes. You could say, like, okay, well, this thing is super unknown, right? We don't know what's going on here, but we know that we don't know about it, right? And we're just going to ignore it for now, because we need to figure out whether the customers actually want what we are building before we venture into that. So something like that I would think about as well. So not trying to build everything at once. But yeah, again, I mean, take whatever I say with a grain of salt. Again, like, I think this, do try to find somebody who has actually successfully built a startup, and pick their brain in regards to what sort of tools and processes they are using. And probably there are a few blog posts from authors of startups. But I mean, that's the way I would think about it. Spend serious time understanding the conceptual model of your business, A. B, define the interface, define the API, and C, aggressively then start to work independently. And then of course, I mean, you need other things like, I mean, if this is your friend that you're working with, and if you're only 2 people, you probably have proximity, so you can probably meet up tons of, I mean, often, right? So you work independently, meet up. You work independently, meet up. You work independently, meet up, so that you're not sort of actually spending too much time going in circles, right? You can clearly help each other. That's actually another. So sorry, those are my. Let me just say, those are my 2 sort of main points, and I would also throw lean in there to like as this sort of the thing that's always present, right? Like we should never forget that we need to be super lean when entering into business endeavors, because we do tend to overestimate how much people will appreciate the glory of our product, when in fact, like, they tend to not really care, right? So we need to be really careful in making decisions that will paint us into corners that we can't get out of. So stay flexible and keep throwing out your product to customers. What was I going to say? There was something I was sorry, one other thing that I keep thinking about is I've been thinking about this in regards to teams generally. Maybe this applies to more bigger teams, but I would think of the statement trust but verify, right? So there's this idea that sort of total autonomy. Whoa, sorry, I'm about to drop my phone. So there's this idea that sort of total autonomy is a good thing, and I'm just thinking, I'm not sure it's really a great thing, right? It's like, well, you need autonomy, but so let me put it this way: if your boss leaves you to do your thing completely on your own and never comes to visit you, well, I would assume that boss simply either doesn't care about the outcome, or is somehow arrogant enough to not engage with you on the, say, quotation marks, floor, right? Like I think it's ridiculous that we have this sort of, well, you do your thing and you know everything about that, and I do my thing and I know everything about that, and I assume that you know nothing about my thing and you assume that I know nothing about your thing, right? Like, I think that's ridiculous. I think it's deeply, let me try to find the word, like disheartening. It's probably not the right word, but like it's first of all definitely rude, like seriously rude, right? Because I think programmers become better programmers by understanding how managers think, right? And managers become better managers by understanding what programmers think. And that's the sort of symbiosis that we're looking for, right? So to do that, if you are the manager, then you need to trust but verify. You need to engage with the people who are, quotation marks, on the floor, because they're the people who are doing the actual work, right? So autonomy is sort of two-sided, right? Like, you can't leave people completely on their own, right? So okay, if we scale this down to a 2-person team, then I would think about it as that, well, you can't just say, well, I'm going to do my thing and you're going to do your thing, and then we'll meet in 6 months whenever you are done or whenever I'm done. Or, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that extreme. It could be like, okay, well, let's meet every day and talk about how far we've come, but if you have troubles, I'll never help you, right? Like, that's stupid. Of course, we should try to help each other to figure out both of the tasks, right? And we should learn about the issues within the other person's domain. So, like, there has to be some level of collaboration and some level of co-contamination or something like that, right? I think you see what I'm saying. Like, it's important for everyone to learn a bit about everything, right? A bit, right? Of course, there is no. So again, like, it's a floating scale, because neither of the extremes are any good. But okay, so now this is sort of tangential, but hopefully those are some points that are pretty useful. Conceptual modeling, designing the interface, so designing the API, and staying lean. And actually, let's throw the fourth in there as well, right? And making sure to collaborate and not isolate, I guess, is a way we can think about it. Something like that. Super good. I hope that helps. This is a very interesting question. I might either turn this into a YouTube video or re-record this in a more proper manner when my hair is not as messed up as in this video. Anyways, sorry, thanks a bunch for the question. Thanks for watching the YouTube channel, and I hope to talk to you again. Let me know if there was anything that you found strange or that you want to have clarified, or whether you're outrageously angry because you think I didn't answer your question. Anyways, I'll see you around, and thanks for watching. Thanks for the question.